I left my wife 3 months ago. I was 67 years old. People ask me why I waited so long, and I tell them the truth. I didn't know I was allowed to leave. That sounds absurd, I know. I'm a grown man. I've made decisions my whole life. Career moves, financial investments, where to live, what car to drive. But leaving a marriage? That felt like something other people did. Reckless people. Selfish people. Not men like me who'd stood at an altar 40 years ago and promised forever. But here's what I've learned. Forever is a long time to feel invisible. I can't pinpoint exactly when it started. That's the insidious thing about slow deaths. And they don't announce themselves. There's no single moment when everything changes. Instead, it's 1,000 small moments, 1,000 tiny erasures, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you're not sure who's looking back. In the beginning, we were good, not perfect, but good. Sarah was sharp and beautiful, with opinions about everything. I loved that about her. I was quieter, more measured, but she seemed to like that I balanced her energy. We built a life together, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, jobs that paid the bills and then some. From the outside, we looked like we'd figured it out. But somewhere in the middle of raising children and climbing career ladders and maintaining the lawn and attending parent-teacher conferences, we stopped looking at each other. I don't mean literally. We still occupied the same space. We still spoke, but the looking, the real seeing that disappeared. I remember trying to talk to her about a decision I was wrestling with at work. This was maybe 15 years ago. I'd been offered a promotion that would mean more money, but also more travel, more stress. I wanted her perspective. I wanted to think it through together. But when I started explaining it over dinner, her eyes glazed over. She nodded in the right places, made appropriate sounds, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. She was somewhere else entirely. I took the promotion. She never asked how it turned out. That became the pattern. I would reach out, try to connect, and encounter a wall of polite disinterest. After a while, I stopped reaching. It hurt less that way. The physical distance came gradually too. First, it was exhaustion. Both of us too tired from our days to do more than collapse into bed. Then it was separate schedules. Her staying up late, me rising early. Then it was the guest room, ostensibly because of my snoring, though I suspect we both knew that was just the excuse we needed. I can't remember the last time we touched with intention, the last time her hand found mine just because, the last time there was desire or even basic affection. For years, I told myself this was normal. Marriage isn't supposed to be fireworks forever. People settle. People get comfortable. I had friends whose marriages looked similar. Polite cohabitation, parallel lives under the same roof. Maybe this was just what happened when you stuck it out long enough. But there was this ache, this persistent, dull ache that I carried in my chest. I would be at work, focused on a project, and suddenly feel it, this overwhelming loneliness. I would be in a crowded room and feel utterly alone. I would lie in bed at night, my wife sleeping in another room, and wonder if this was really all there was left. I tried to talk to her about it a few times over the years, gently, carefully, because I knew how these conversations could spiral. I feel like we're drifting apart, I'd say, or I miss us. She would get defensive immediately, tell me I was being dramatic, remind me that marriage takes work, that not everything is romance and excitement. She'd list all the things we had, the house, the kids, our retirement accounts, as if financial security and shared history could fill the emptiness. And I would back down, apologize, tell myself she was right, that I was asking for too much. The kids left for college, and then they left for their own lives. The house got quieter. We had fewer buffers, fewer distractions. It became harder to ignore how little we had to say to each other. Sarah filled her time with book clubs and volunteer work and trips to visit friends. I filled mine with hobbies I'd always meant to pursue: woodworking, learning guitar, long hikes. We were both busy. We were both fine, except I wasn't fine. I was withering. That's the only word I can think of. Like a plant kept just barely alive, enough water to survive, but not enough sunlight to grow. I was going through the motions of living without actually feeling alive. The turning point came on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. Sarah was out at one of her committee meetings. I was home alone, finishing up some work emails, when my brother called. David and I aren't particularly close. He lives across the country, and we only talk a few times a year. But his wife had just passed away after a long illness, and he was calling to let me know about the memorial service. We talked for over an hour. He told me about her final weeks, about sitting beside her bed, about all the things they'd said to each other. And then he said something that broke me open. I'm grateful we had time to say everything, he said. We talked about our whole life together, the good parts, the hard parts, all of it. She told me she felt loved, and I got to tell her that she made my life better every single day. I sat in my home office after we hung up, and I cried. Really cried for the first time in years. I'm grateful we had time to say everything, he said. We talked about our whole life together, the good parts, the hard parts, all of it. She told me she felt loved, and I got to tell her that she made my life better every single day. I sat in my home office after we hung up, and I cried, really cried for the first time in years. And the thought that terrified me most, I might have 20 or 30 years left. Maybe more. Medical advances, good genes, who knows? But however much time I had left, did I want to spend it like this? Politely coexisting with someone I'd once loved but no longer really knew? The answer came swift and clear: no. I thought about it for weeks. I played every scenario in my head. The guilt, the judgment, the disappointment from our kids, the financial complications, the loneliness of starting over at my age. All of it. But I also thought about the alternative. 20 more years of separate bedrooms and separate lives. 20 more years of feeling unseen. 20 more years of shrinking myself smaller and smaller until there was nothing left. I decided I would rather be alone and whole than partnered and hollow. When I told Sarah, she was shocked. I could see it in her face, genuine surprise. She truly hadn't seen this coming. To her, we were fine. We'd made it this far, hadn't we? We'd done what we were supposed to do. But we're comfortable, she said. We have a life together. We have a routine, I corrected gently. That's not the same as a life. She got angry then, accused me of having a midlife crisis. Though at 67, it was a bit late for that. Accused me of being selfish, of throwing away 40 years over some fantasy of what life should be. She asked if there was someone else. There wasn't. There isn't. This wasn't about finding something new. It was about refusing to accept something that was slowly killing me. We tried counseling, briefly, because that's what you're supposed to do. But it became clear quickly that Sarah wanted to fix things enough to stay together, while I wanted to understand why we'd become strangers. We were solving for different outcomes. The practical parts were surprisingly straightforward. We'd both been financially independent. The kids were grown. The house would be sold. We could be civil about division of assets. The emotional parts were messier. Our daughter cried and asked why I couldn't just stick it out. Our son was more understanding but still hurt. Friends took sides or disappeared entirely. Some people were supportive. Others looked at me like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. I moved into a small apartment near the water. It's quiet. It's simple. It's mine. I've been here 3 months now, and I won't lie and say it's all been easy. There are lonely nights. There are moments of doubt. There are times I wonder if I made a terrible mistake. But then I wake up in the morning and I feel something I haven't felt in decades: possibility. I don't know what comes next. Maybe I'll meet someone new, though that's not the goal. Maybe I'll travel, pick up new hobbies, reconnect with old friends. Maybe I'll just enjoy the freedom of eating breakfast when I want, watching what I want on television, spending my Saturday however I choose, without negotiating or explaining. What I do know is this: I feel like myself again. Or maybe I'm discovering who myself actually is underneath all those years of accommodation and diminishment. I've started playing guitar more seriously. I've joined a hiking group. I've had actual conversations with people who seem interested in what I have to say. Small things, maybe, but they feel significant. A few weeks ago, I was sitting on my small balcony, watching the sunset over the water, and I realized I was happy. Not distracted, not content, not fine, actually happy. It was such a foreign feeling that it almost frightened me. I spent 40 years in a marriage where I felt unseen, where my thoughts and feelings and desires were secondary, if they registered at all, where I made myself smaller and quieter and less demanding, hoping that would be enough to keep the peace. But it was never enough, and it was costing me myself. People my age aren't supposed to make these kinds of changes. We're supposed to be settling in, accepting our lot, grateful for what we have, and I understand that perspective. I do. There's wisdom in acceptance, in not chasing some ideal that doesn't exist. But there's also wisdom in knowing when acceptance has crossed over into resignation, when staying has become its own kind of leaving, a leaving of yourself. I don't regret my marriage. It gave me my children, my career, many years of good moments. Sarah isn't a villain in this story. She's just someone I grew apart from, as she grew apart from me. We became two people who shared space but not lives, who had history but not connection. And at a certain point, I had to ask myself, is shared history enough? For me, the answer was no. I chose freedom. Not freedom from Sarah exactly, but freedom to be seen again. Freedom to take up space. Freedom to want things and say things and feel things without constantly measuring them against someone else's disinterest. I chose the possibility of mattering to someone, even if that someone is just myself. I'm 67 years old. With luck, I have time left. Not as much as I once did, certainly, but some. And I've decided that however much time I have, I want to spend it living, not just existing. That's not selfish. That's not a crisis. That's just finally, after all these years, choosing myself. And it turns out I'm worth choosing.